In this video we're going to take a look here at the sigma material that we have. In many ways this is quite a simple material with only a small number of variables for us to adjust, and it's really just a standard diffuse type material with some scattering. As you can see, we just have a couple of things here like the diffuse weight, which brightens or darkens the material, of course just affects its diffuse. We have a specular weight here, which of course makes it shiny and reflective with, of course, roughness. And then we also have a scattering weight, which controls the amount of subsurface scattering going on. Now, this is an energy conservation material. Let me just give it a colour here to show this off. You can see that as we turn up the specular weight, then the diffuse weight is automatically going down, or rather the value, of course, of the weight isn't, but internally the diffuse is going down, such that when we reach 100% specular, then there is of course no diffuse. The same is true with scattering. When the scattering is at 100%, it doesn't matter if the specular is high, because if light is being reflected off the surface, then clearly it can't be scattering through it. What you will also find is that the scattering weight here trumps the diffuse. So here you see I've got my scattering colour set to white, and we see that what we're getting out is this white shade. There's none of the blue. So as the scattering increases, then the diffuse also, of course, balances into a decrease. Just throw on a backdrop to demonstrate that whilst it is energy conserving, it is not physically real in the sense of having a Fresnel function. And so, of course, if you are wishing to add Fresnel to it, then you would do it in any of the regular ways here. And of course, because specular is the primary function, it overrides the diffuse, it overrides the scattering, then of course you would just need to hook the Fresnel to the specular weight, and the other parameters would be automatically adjusted for you, like this. The only other one that you might wish to adjust with the same Fresnel is of course the specular colour. So if you were going to provide tinting to the specularity based on angle, then you might want to change the colour here between whatever the diffuse colour was and perhaps white at the edges. Used in this way just as a normal diffuse material with a specular layer, then it's nice enough, but quite frankly we have plenty of other materials that do similar things. We've got delta, we've got of course principled, we can even use the standard surface. Where sigma really comes into its own is with its subsurface scattering. So let's just turn that up some, and let's give it a slightly different colour than white. We'll just go for a pink here, I guess, as it contrasts with the blue. What you can see immediately, of course, is that we have this RGB noise that's being refined on our material. The scattering in sigma is a full spectral scatter. Light rays don't simply go into a depth and come out somewhere or not. Red, green and blue light can be separated and treated differently. As such, we don't just have scattering, we have dispersive scattering. What does this mean then? Well, two things. First of all, it is slower to render, and it does require usually more subsurface samples than the other SSS types in order to resolve. However, it is also, into the bargain, fantastically beautiful scattering. As we see here, this blend out that it's doing between a pink and a blue surface, which of course is being attenuated at the different depths here, is absolutely gorgeous. If we get the scattering right up to 100%, then of course the blue goes away as our light is being fully scattered. We're not getting any diffuse colour, we're only getting the scattering colour come through. And we can see that in situations where it is backlit like this, it comes through particularly soft and gentle. And also what we see is certain areas where a mesh corner occurs, as when these blobs adjoining the body render out nice and smoothly, which can sometimes pick up a bit of brightening with the other subsurface. We notice as well that as we alter the distance, so of course as we change that, then the shine through will get greater or lesser. With larger values we get stronger shine through here of the light rays, and of course at shorter distances then we are getting less shine through, of course. It does also affect the scattering from the front side. So we see here that when our scattering distance is low, then this front side is quite bright. But of course, as that distance increases, we see that start to render out darker, as of course more light is passing in and just not coming back towards us at all. More is being passed through, and of course as it fails to reach the full thickness of the object, it is just being absorbed. This works particularly well on surfaces that are of a single colour with scattering, such as here on a small scale. We can quite easily get a really beautiful Parian marble style surface. Very smooth, translucent, good glossiness, and on some of the more intricate areas here, such as we see with the ear meeting the hairline, we get a lovely surface without artifacts at intersection points or tight corners. We get this lovely sense of translucency, which we can see viewing from the front lit angle here. And we can also see that very small details, such as the fingers of this figurine as we see here, or indeed her toes, are handled really quite beautifully, which makes Sigma an all-round fantastic shader for surfaces of this type, be that marbled or waxy surfaces, and translucent solids that really seem to radiate the light that is scattering through them. It becomes very easy to get this soft, creamy, transmissive look. Additionally, there is also another place where Sigma really shines, and that is in doing skin-like surfaces. Of course, like the other SSS shaders, you have, your main surface colour and this scattering colour here, or in the case of skin, you have 3 scattering colours. And determining the colour that you see is about balancing them out, because of course you get this mix of the colours together. Your final colour is a mixture of both your surface colour and your scattering colour. As such, when trying to do skin surfaces, and of course you want the scattering to project through this red light as the light passes through the deeper layers of skin, you can wind up with a bit of play with these, different coloured layers to try and get something that has the right sort of balance to it for when you're just looking at it normally from the front. What Sigma gives you is the ability to set your scattering distance differently for red, green and blue light. And this makes setting up scattering where you want to have a certain forward colour but you want a different shine through colour particularly easy. So as you can see on this little fellow here, I've got this, approximate skin colour plugged in, but I've got it both for the diffuse colour and the scattering colour here. It's exactly the same colour for both. What I'm able to do, however, is to increase the distance of, say, just the red light. And as such, what I'm able to do is control my shine through colour without having to balance out these 2 different colours or colour maps to try and get a good and decent amount of colour from the front plus colour from the shine through. And so you can see how, like this, because we do have both green and blue scattering at a shorter distance, then at very thin areas of the mesh, such as along the edge of the nose here, or just on the little tips of these horns, then the regular scattering colour is coming fully through, as both the red, green and blue light are all making it through equally well. But then as the mesh starts to get thicker, so as we work further into the horn or back more into the nose, then the green and the blue light are becoming absorbed whilst the red continues to pass through. Essentially, rather than providing a different colour for the scattering colour and trying to pair that with a diffuse colour plus balancing out the 2 weights against one another, I can use the single colour for both, and then I can create my tinting based on the scattering distance. The other place where Sigma comes in very useful as a skin shader is when you want to do darker colours of skin. Lighter and whiter skin in many ways is a lot easier to do with subsurface scattering. You just sort of get a pale pink main colour, and whether it be through the scattering colour or distance, or however you're doing it in another shader, you just get a dark pink, deep pink or red as a shine through colour, and it more or less looks plausible even if it's a little bit off in tonality. Darker colours of skin, and especially black skin, have a real problem looking so good in subsurface shading because it's very difficult to balance out the different layers of colour with one another. The principal problem, of course, is that with darker skin you've got more pigment in the skin, and because it is dark it is absorbing light. As a result, even though it still has the red blood-filled layers underneath, you don't get the same sort of shine through. And setting up black skin and having this bright pink or red shine through on ears or noses or whatnot can start to look a little bit fake. And it becomes one of those, tweak or die nightmares to try and get the correct balance of colours to make the main surface of the skin look like you're wanting it to. Sigma makes that an awful lot easier, as again, you can just stick your desired colour into both the main and the scattering slots, or slightly different versions. You might go for quite a dark top colour with a slightly lighter scattering colour. That can often be a good mix, but then you allow the light to penetrate at these different wavelengths to different depths, of course giving primacy to the red, and whilst that still allows the redness to penetrate through the thin areas, you get much more light absorbed by the dark colour, and so you get this much dimmer effect that's much more natural. As such, it's generally true with Sigma that doing any skin tone or shade is just as easy as doing any other. And as the skin shade you're going after gets darker and darker and darker, it tends to become progressively easier than trying to wrangle those colours with any of the other subsurface scattering shaders. Not to mention, of course, how it can behave with just about any colour. So were you needing to do the skin shading for a certain jolly green giant type of character, you'll find that Sigma can serve you really well in those situations also.